currently recording this session so that those who cannot um, uh, come in because of internet connection, they can watch this on YouTube. So let's now begin. So let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you, good Lord, for this morning you've given to us. Thank you, Lord, sa blessings you have showered upon us. Guide us today, Lord, as we discuss our last topic for this morning. Give us wisdom, understanding, and strength. And Lord, please guide us sa mga upcoming naman yung mga defense and mga exams, Lord. And I just want to give you back all the glory and honor, Lord God. I dedicate this class to you in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so we are now on our last topic, which is forensic psychology. And let's not waste our time anymore. And let's welcome Group 10 as they will discuss about forensic psychology. Sige, pakanta sila. Yay!
Hello, good morning everyone, and a happy new year sa tanan. We are the group 10 and we're about to report the forensic psychology. And here are the table of contents or ang unod sang amon PPT. First are the main and subtopics, the new researches and current trends, the key terms, and the theories. And the first reporter will be Miss Angelis Magaysay.
Good morning, everyone. So we proceed to the forensic psychology. It's come from the Latin word forensic, meaning a forum or ancient Rome judicial system, and it also means a scientific procedure for a criminal inquiry. So, next slide. So we proceed to the next slide. Forensic psychology is also a field that blends psychology uh, and practice the law. The application of clinical specialties to the legal arena. This is all involves working with the offenders and victims of crimes, as well as assisting those tasked with enforcing, practicing, and applying the law. So, next slide. And, yep. Okay. So if you are enjoying learning about the science or human behavior and the law, then forensic psychology will probably interest you quite a bit because nowadays ginagamit siya sa tanan nga show. Either makita mo siya sa television shows, movies, and either sa books. So in forensic psychology, it's study of the effect of legal activity in civil and criminal court matters after a suspect commits a crime. Forensic psychologists may interview them to determine if they're capable of standing trial and what rehabilitation services to offer. So psychologists also standing trial and what rehabilitation. Okay, sorry. Also offers in the courtroom where they provide expert testimonies about defendant's mental stage and assist the validity of witness testimonials. So, one purpose of forensic psychology is to enhance the criminal justice system. Psychologists perform. Okay, psychologists perform testing on suspect already in custody. So they provide services to the victim of crime and their families as they help the law enforcement official develop crime prevention program to protect and serve citizens. For civil matters, psychologists applied their expertise for creating study agreement for children, for example. So we proceed to the next slide. What are the difference of the rule of criminal psychology and forensic psychology? Okay. So here is the description, the difference of criminal psychology and forensic psychology. The criminal psychology, they are deals with examination of feels, responses, thoughts, and the intention of offender behind the crime, while forensic psychology is concerned with the connection between the legal system and the application of psychology in it. So, the rule of criminal psychology, they are determine the offender's reason for the commission of the crime. They focuses on understanding the psychologist's motives behind the crime. They are also interviewing criminals to know about their family background and early life. As they evaluating the scene of crime, witnesses, victims, and assessing these elements concerning the suspects of a crime. So, profiling of the offenders to help the law enforcement agencies to apprehend the offender after the crime is committed. So, they also study and analyze the thoughts and state of mind after committing a crime. So, while the role of the forensic psychology, they analyze the after effect of the offense and impacts upon its victims. So they applied the knowledge of psychology to the criminal justice and frequently deal with the legal aspect of criminal justice. So they study and advise on crime prevention policies, rehabilitation system. They provide victim of the crime with psychological services. They evaluate the offenders and analyze the likelihood of reoffending. So they testify in the court of law on criminal forensic matters. So we are gonna proceed to the next reporter.
For the forensic psychology key terms, every crime must be considered in two parts. It is the actus reus and mens rea. Forgive me kung sala akong pag-pronounce. So, ang actus reus is a Latin term for a guilty act. Is an act that constitutes a crime. Ang actus reus is made up of conduct, circumstances, and results. It also refers to the action of the defender. The conduct is the physical action, for example, like pulling, may pusil ka, kagin pull mo ang trigger mo na ang imo action. Ang circumstance is also important. Like for example, kung nag-pull ka trigger and shooting a gun may not be illegal, like in a professional shooting competitions. But shooting a human being will become illegal. And also, ang result sa nga mo na nga kwan, nga sa pag-shoot mo sa isa ka tawo, may ara isang tawo nga na patay. So, ang actus reus, in short, is ang action, like the word act, sa actus pa lang, is an act, ang action, sa pag-obra sang crime. Muna. Next is ang mens rea. Is the intention to commit the act that constitutes a crime. It is a Latin term for a guilty mind. It refers to the mental element of the crime. Kung ano bala ang motive sang isa ka suspect sa pag-obra sang isa ka krimen. It examines the defendant's state of mind at the time the crime was committed. According to English jurist Edward Coke, he said that an act itself does not make a person guilty of a crime unless their mind is also guilty. For example, may ara duwa ka situations. First situation is si John, ga-drive siya sang iya car. Tas may ara sang isa katawo nga nagtabok sa street. Si John, gintraya gid balalikawan ang gatabok, kaso nalabot ya gid kang napatay ang tawo nga gatabok sa pedestrian. Why intention si John nga mag-cause harm, therefore waay siya sang guilty mind. Pwede siya i-consider nga accident, pero hindi siya criminal act. Second situation is si John naman liwat. Si John, ga-drive siya. Pero sa layo pa lang, nakita yan na ang iya kontra. For example, kontra yan sa negosyo. Gusto niya patyon kay tungod para hindi siya masapawan. Ganon. Gintry, ang ginobra ni John, sa nakita niya pa lang sa layo, ginharurot yan na ang iya car, kag ginhungod, bungguan ang tawo nga to, ang kontraya. Ang iya motive to do is mag-revenge siya iya kag gusto ya patyon to ang tawo nga to because ang hindi ya gusto masapawan ang iya na negosyo. Amo na ang mens rea or we can call it motive sang isa ka tawo sa pag-obra sang crime. Next is a top-down offender profiling. Sorry. Offender profiling. It is an investigative tool used by law enforcement agencies to identify likely suspects and analyze patterns that may predict future offenses or victims. If watch kamo sa una or sa mga crime investigative movies bala, usually ang mga investigators may ara na sila folder containing sang information sang isa ka kriminal. Like for example, may ara sa some picture. Ang usual na content sang isa ka offender profile or mas na siya commonly called as criminal profile if galantaw kamo CSI Miami sang una. Ang content ng offender's profile or ang marital status siya is the criminal single, married siya, may family siya. Ang address sang criminal, for example, Santo Domingo Street, Haro. Tapos ang gina-specify dira, if ang criminal ga-star bala siya sa isa ka apartment, isa ka balay, isa ka condominium, or isa ka nga kubo, mga muna, gina-specify para ma-detect later ang location. Next is ang appearance, ang under man yapon sa contents ng offender's profile. Sa appearance, dira gina-state ang iya height, anong iya looks like. For example, ang isa ka criminal neat in appearance, short hair siya, kag kung magsuksok sa bayo, ang prefer yan ng mga bayo is ang mga darker colors by choice. Next is personality. Ang personality sa isa ka criminal is, for example, like quiet siya, modest, or conservative siya. Though ang base lang ni sa mga witnesses, wala kung sino nakakilala sa criminal. Though mga example, sa mga neighbors siya, o pwede sa work, doon na ginakwaan nila information kag data. Next is materials possessed. For example, may ara siya car, may ara siya motor. Tapos gina-specify na kung ano na specific color ang ginahandle sa isa ka criminal. Like, for example, ang kay Ted Bundy, if kilala niyo si Ted Bundy, ang iya na gingamit nga car para sa mga suspect was a Volkswagen Beetle. Doon mo na nag-famous ang Ted Bundy. Kagang doon nagpatok, pag siguro, I don't know if sakto siya nagpatok sa tungod kay Ted Bundy, pero dugay na ni ang Volkswagen. Pero tungod kay Ted Bundy, doon nagsulod liwat sa scene ang Volkswagen Beetle. And also, ang under sa offender profiling or criminal profile is ang types of people the person spends with. Ang example, si kay Ted Bundy liwat, si Ted Bundy usually ang iya mga victims is mga women nga pretty, right? Tas muna ang mga investigators makakita sang lead nga kung ano pagid ang future victims kay tungod sa mga victims na Ted Bundy sang una nga mga past victims si Ted Bundy mga female, mga young pretty female ang iyan mga victims mo na ang mga investigators ginabantayan ang move ni Ted Bundy with sa mga young female nga ladies, pretty ladies. Okay, next is the top-down approach, usually used by US FBI in offender profiling. It uses experience and intuition to draw up a profile from the crime scene, where it is often violent crimes committed, such as murder. It uses seven-stage process to narrow down the number of possible suspects for a crime. Ang top-down approach is ang American way nga mag-approach siya magkubra sang profiling. From the data gathered at the crime scene, the investigators can identify the characteristics of the offender. For example, ang lifestyle niya kag ang personality characteristics. With this, the offender is categorized as either an organized or a disorganized offender. Kung magambal kita organized, like may plano, wala sa ga-leave wala ang suspect wala ga-leave tracks do wala siya bala ga-leave clue sa crime scene. Like high IQ ang isa ka organized nga offender. While ang disorganized naman, classmates, is ang do kita mo na do nadala ang usually I don't know kung sakto siya. Do nadala lang sa emotions nga din stab ang isa ka tawo, isa man na siya ka disorganized nga offender. Tapos pag stab sang isa ka tawo, nalimta niya ang kutsilyo nga nadala nga gingamit So isa na siya ka disorganized offender. It is a top-down approach because it attempts to fit crime details under pre-existing categories or usually called typologies. Ang pre-existing categories like ang iban na mga offenders may ara na sa mga ng category. Dira na sila din kasulod-sulod kung ano ang ginpang violate. Next is investigative psychology. Sorry. New field within psychology which attempts to describe the actions of offenders and to develop an understanding of crime. This understanding can then help solve crimes and contribute to prosecution and defense procedure. So, ang ultimate goal ng investigative psychology is to assist with solving crimes and provide empirical evidence for court cases. And more on, ang investigative psychology, it helps more on sa criminal profiling. Next. Ay, ako gali. Wait. Next is, for the key terms, is geographic profiling. A criminal investigative methodology that analyzes the locations of a connected series of crimes to determine the most probable area of offender residence. Kagina, ang offender profiling is ang suspect ang gina-profile. Ang geographical profiling naman is ang location kung sa diin gin-commit ang crime. For example, dira sa balay, sa barangay, sa may lapit si Pio, dira ang gin-commit ang crime. Ang mayara na siya ang hunting behavior bala. For example, ang suspect is neighbor sang isa ang sang victim. May probability nga may pagid siya atakihon or may commit naman siya na crime with the other neighbors sa dira na community. Ang unod sang geographic profiling ga focus sa laban sa ang hunting behavior sang suspect, ang target location, case examples, and investigative strategies. So sa liwat, ang geographic profiling is ang location ang ginakuha sang data, while si offender ang suspect. Next is the bottom-up approach. Ang bottom-up approach is data-driven compared mo sa top-down and is used by British na mga investigators. Ang bottom-up approach starts with small details and it works its way up to the bigger picture. No initial assumptions, and it heavily relies on computer databases. It can be the little details that are often overlooked that can be crucial to the success of a case. The profile is constructed based on the association between the particular characteristics of the offense and the offender. So bali, ang sa bottom-up approach siya, gagamit si investigative psychology and geographical profiling para makita nila ang potential criminal nga lakpo nila. Ang gabase nila sa facts kag sa mga figures from the previous crimes of the same type as well as psychological theory, removing the element of intuition. So next is minimalization. It is a cognitive distortion that serves to downplay a criminal behavior by the offender. This may be seen as self-deception, where the offender does not accept the full reality of the situation. Ang magamba kita minimalization do gina-deny kumbaga sang suspect ang iya na ginaobra, like do gina what do you call this? Ang person is more likely to minimize or play down the severity of the situation they are in. Do gina paliko-liko ya bala ang storya. Ang kag wala ya ginahambal kung ano gid ang ang kung sa mga hampang pag wala ginahambal ang highlight sang situation sang crime. Ang hindi nila kaya pag-akuon ang crime or ang situation because of their emotional guilt. Next is custodial sentencing or a prison sentence. Ang imprisonment is the most severe sentence available to the courts. Custodial sentences are reserved for the most serious offenses and are imposed when the offense committed is so serious that neither a fine alone nor a community sentence can be justified for the offense. A custodial sentence may be imposed where the court believes it is necessary to protect the public. The length of the sentence depends on the seriousness of the offense and the maximum penalty for the crime allowed by law. Parliament has also introduced minimum sentences for some serious offenses. So, bali, ang prison sentences, ga-depend na siya sa imong ginobra na crime. May ara, kung may kabati, kamo sa mga balita, may mga lifetime sentences, mga 30 years nga sentences, tas may ara siyang iban nga do hindi pwede mapiyansahan kay tungod kadako gid sang iya nga gin obra nga sala. So next is deterrence. The use of punishment as a threat to prevent people from offending. So parehas bala like may pina-pina. For example, you don't need kung mag-smoke kita sa outside may tatlo na ata ka stages ang ICAS. Ang first offense is ang kwaon, ang do i-confiscate, I don't know kung tsakto gin man. May pina na siya do 500. Tas next is ang second offense is 1,000 and lastly ang may ko kabalo sang ika-third basta may tatlo lang na siya ka punishment para hindi for smoking. Next is rehabilitation. To restore the mindset and behavior of an offender to being a non-offender. Ang rehabilitation, sometimes it happens sa prison. May ara na sila rehabilitation center. I think kung may-ari na di sa Iloilo, sa rehab center for prisons. I don't know lang. Correct me if I'm wrong. Pero rehabilitation, do may ara man na sila, do I think may therapy na da sila kuno based sa friend namon nga gaobra sa police station. May ara na sila kuno sang do gina-therapy kag ginastorya na daw ang mga offenders kag ginapaamat-amat kuno share sang ila mga ang natabo sa ang ginobraya na crime. Next is retribution. Hindi ni siya sa ML na retri ha. A punishment inflicted on someone as vengeance for a wrong criminal act. So ang retribution gabalik bala do nagbalik sa kriminal, ah, do parehas balang I don't know kung tsakto gyud pag-explain kung retribution do hindi gusto makilalaan ang identity sang do hindi gusto mabalikan bala ang kwan ang nag-obra sang crime do na. Next is recidivism, relapsing into criminal behavior, typically after having crime prevention intervention. Ang do nagkuan na siya do nag-mild na siya, do naglaylo na siya, kung baga. Atavistic form, a possible explanation for criminal offending, centering on the idea that offenders may represent more primitive evolutionary stage of development than their contemporaries. This may be shown in a range of facial and physical features. Wait. Ang isa ni siya ka-historical approach to explain criminal behavior, which is based on biological factors. Ang explanation ni was proposed by Lombroso sang 1870s and suggests that some people are born with a criminal personality. For example, innate siya. That is a throwback to a previous more primitive ancestor. Though kan siya bala like though iga-passed on ang gapas on ang pagka-criminal daw sa mo ni ang atavistic form. Anger management, a cognitive intervention that aims to help the offender control their feelings of anger so that it does not prompt aggressive or anger-rooted criminal acts. If nadumduman nyo ang isa to ka murder bala, I'm sorry, trigger warning lang and disclaimer lang. If ang nadamdaman niyo tong police, it was Christmas Day, ang ginpatay atong tig-ulang, kag ang bata, yakay tungod ko no, sa buga, bala that was last year lang. Ang, based sa mga initial nga kwan, nga mga, ginpangbasa ko, out of anger, to ko nung pagtiro, kapag patay to sa tig-ulang, kag sa kag sa iya bata, like kay tungod dugin sorry for the term, dugin yagota siya, dugin na yagota siya kag dugin na labotaw mo na ang do nagsupot iya emotion, do nangakig siya amo to ang cause sa pagtiro ya and pagpatay sang duwa to ka victims, ang tigulang kag ang iya bata. So ang anger management, it is very crucial, especially if may ara like may ga-possess ang isa ka tawo sang mga armed guns, like mga guns, kay we don't know daan kung basi bala gulpi siya ngakig and gulpi lang siyang pagwapusil, amo na ang need gid siya sang anger management, especially why man sa ginakuan mga police, mga security guards, ang mga usually ang mga hindi man guro sa galimit sa dira, pero sa tanan man guro nga types of job need na ton anger management kay iga-affect na siya sa aton nga palibot. And lastly, for the forensic psychology key terms is the restorative justice programs. It is a new type of intervention whereby offender meet their victims and attempt to realize their implications of their actions, repair the harm they have caused, and overall have a better relationship with their self, their victims, and the society. May ginlantaw ko actually na series na dugin pa face to face and ay nalipat lang gid ko sang title. Ang pa face to face ang victim kag ang parents sang victim kag ang suspect kag pa explain bala why ginobra to sang suspect kag anong iya motive para I know nga wala man gyapon hindi man gyapon magaan justice if magkuan bala kus mangayo so sorry kay wala na ba ang for example, wala na 'tong bata. Pero like, for the victim but, for the suspect kag ang kwan, ang parents ng victim do ma-lessen I think ang burden kag do makalma, ma-realize man sang kwan sang especially sang suspect nga sala ang iya obra. So that's for the forensic psychology key terms. I will turn it to the next reporter. So ako man gali gyapon mabasa. So theory of crime, criminal man, and atavism. Cesar Lombroso was an Italian criminologist, phrenologist, physician, and founder of the Italian school of positivist psychology, criminology. Lombroso's theory of criminology suggests that criminality is inherited and that someone born criminal could be identified by the way they look. Like for example, uh, I don't know kung ga-relate man siya. If dalan taw kamo Lion King kanguna, tas si Scar bala kag si Kovu kay tungod may Scar man si Kovu, ginkuan siya, gin-assume na lang siya nga bad guy siya kay tungod it's the same sa kay Tito ya nga si Scar. So mo na ang pero hindi criminal, yes, the bad guy si Kovu. So mo na ako an example pero kabay pa nga ga-relate siya. So next is theory of crime, criminal, man, and atavism. In 1876, Lombroso proposed atavistic form as an explanation of offending behavior. The criminal man or l'homme delinquent by Lombroso suggested that there was a distinct biological class of people that were prone to criminality. These people exhibited atavistic, in example, primitive features, and atavistic derives from the word avatus, which means ancestor in Latin. These atavistic characteristics, argued, denoted the fact that the offenders were at a more primitive stage of evolution than non-offenders. Theory of this made them wilder, untamed, and unable to fit in the 1870s society. Therefore, they would inevitably turn to crime. For example, may types of criminal and its features. Isa ka thieves, ang thieves or ang mga kawatan, expressive face. Ang features has expressive face, manual dexterity, and small wandering eyes. Ang murderers, they have cold, glassy stares, bloodshot eyes, and big hawk-like nose. Look, offending naman. Char lang. Sex offenders, cold, glassy stares, bloodshot eyes, same man sa murderers. Ang women offenders are shorter and more wrinkled, darker hair, and smaller skulls than normal women. Like, pero ang mani nga mga forms hindi some 1870s pa ni pero subong I don't know lain naguro ang ilatsura. So next is the Lombroso argued that criminals were not to blame for their criminal activities as their behavior was determined by their physiology. This theory was influenced by Darwin's theory of evolution. The Origin of the Species was published in 1859. Wait lang. Measuring the born criminal. So Lombroso examined over 4,000 offenders, living and dead, to identify the physical markers indicative of the atavistic form. In a study of 383 dead Italian criminals and 3,839 living ones, he found 40% of them had atavistic characteristics. Example of things Lombroso measured were people's height, weight, the span of their arms, the average height of their body while seated, the sizes of their hands, necks, thighs and legs and feet, their eye color, and so on. Sa critical evaluation, Lombroso became known as the father of modern criminology. Lombroso's theory of the born criminal dominated thinking about criminal behavior in the late 19th century and the early 20th century. However, the research carried out by Lombroso lacked the rigor we now expect from the scientific studies. He didn't use a control group against which to compare his participants. According to Agnew 1992, possessing these unpleasant physical characteristics might lead to unpleasant social interactions. This leads to frustration and anger, which in turn lead to offending behavior. Also, Goring 1913 said Goring carried out a study comparing over 2,000 London convicts with a control group, but he failed to replicate Lombroso's findings. And Lombroso argued that the physical characteristics he identified were innate, but this might not have been the case. They have been influenced by environmental factors such as poor nutrition in childhood. This theory is deterministic as it implies that possessing particular innate physical characteristics is likely to lead to crime. This explanation is socially sensitive. Some of the features described by Lombroso are linked to skin color and other traits are associated with the concept of race, so it has been accused of scientific racism. Furthermore, this theory has also been used to support eugenics. Eugenics is a philosophy arguing that those who are born with genetic advantages should be allowed to breed for the good of society, but those who are born with genetic disadvantages should be eliminated to improve the genetic quality of the human population. Next reporter na po.
Hello, good morning, good noon. Areas of forensic psychology. So, there are one, two, three, four, five, six areas. So, next PowerPoint, please. So, for the first area of forensic psychology, we have legal proceedings. It may take hands-on approach to crime solving. Professionals collaborate with local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, as well as district, state, or federal prosecutors' offices. So, forensic psychology professionals analyze violent criminal at large, examining crime scene evidence and evaluating suspects' history. So, sa legal proceedings, since hindi tayo pwede basta-basta mag-investigate, it is when the forensic psychologists take over and do all the necessary procedures on finding out clues and evidences by turning to agencies or law states that could help them investigate the case further through legal procedures. So next is the trial proceedings and queries. So the profession determines whether the jurors are objective, a process called voir dire. So voir dire, a French phrase which means to see, to speak. So it is a questioning of prospective jurors by a judge and attorneys in court. It is a preliminary examination of a witness or the jury polled by a judge or counsel. During this phase of jury selection, the attorneys for each party, as well as the judge, ask questions of each potential juror to determine whether he or she has any bias regarding the case or other reason he or she could not be chosen. So, for example, forensic psychology expert might look for specific behavior clues and read between the lines of answers of voir dire queries to try to determine how a juror might respond to evidence during a trial. So, this is the part where we reduce the bias. So, kumukuha sila from the pool of the jurors and mga potential jurors to tapos ina-examine nila kung okay ba sila para mag-proceed sa trial.
Everything okay?
Gaotod-otod gimanat daylay ka, ma'am. Hina pagidaan nila ko ng signal.
Okay, sige. Anyone who can sub?
Ako na lang, ma'am.
Sige.
Send yaman ang yes. Sa next, okay. Sa mental health. Sa mental health facilities and prisons, professionals give inputs on, ay wait lang, joke.
Wait lang yan. Chill. Kalma ta.
Okay. Dito yan, okay. Crime solving. So, solving may take hands-on approach to crime solving. Professionals collaborate with local, state, federal law enforcement agencies as well as district, state, or federal prosecutor's office. Forensic psychology professionals analyze violent criminal at large, examining crime scene evidence and evaluating suspects' history. So just like the legal proceedings, it is when forensic psychologists turn to federal law, states, and agencies to aid them with examining crimes and evidences regarding the scene and the suspect. Next. Then we have the mental health facilities and prisons. Professionals give inputs on patient or inmate behavior. They support certified forensic psychologists in assessing housing assignments, parole, release, or continued detainment of such individuals. So, it is where some criminals or suspects are detained or examined. It is done in order to keep them in check and guarded. So, sa dire do, like, gina-check nila ang offenders if ano ang ila mahambal, if i-release na ba sila or i-continue, i-detain, or kailangan nila sang assessment or what, or consultation. The next is the victim advocacy. Those with bachelor's degree in forensic psychology can take on roles as victim advocates. Professionals interact with law enforcement and other officials to offer support and social welfare services to those victimized by crimes as well as their families and loved ones. So, ga-offer sila psychological what do you call that? So, psychological assessments to victims of the offenders. Next. So we have the new researches in the Philippines entitled Exploring the Practices, Trends, and Future Directions of Forensic Psychologies in the Philippines. So forensic psychology is an emerging field of psychological practices in the Philippines. The vital competencies needed in forensic psychology are skills in psychological assessment, clinical strength, and ethical sensitivity and uprightness. And the main areas of forensic psychology practice in the Philippines are instances involving abuse against women and children, child custody evaluations, competency assessments to stand in trials, and marriage annulment. So, there wala pa shadow studies about forensic psychology in the Philippines kay emerging pa lang siya, and gamay pa lang man ang schools nga ga-offer sang forensic psychology here in the Philippines. Next. So we have the current trends. Psychology involvement in policy. Online therapy is here to stay, and Philippine judiciary and criminal justice system under pressure and inside look. Next. Next, please. So psychology's involvement in policing. Psychologists are tackling overly aggressive, racially biased policing on multiple fronts. New research on officer behavior, implicit bias, and screening is shaping legislation and agency priority. So, amo na siya ang sa Black Lives Matter. Like, ang amo na ang ginabit sang mga police ang mga black people because of racism. So, there na siya. Next. Online therapy is here to say, as most of the healthcare providers have adjusted to use telehealth and see patients remotely because of the COVID-19 pandemic, psychologists need to be aware of its general privacy and security risks, such as possibility of data breaches, and take steps to minimize them. So, sa nagka-COVID, do tanan na ta, nasa digital, gayus na sang digital devices. So, pwede ang mga privacy, ang mga confidential data, pwede ma-hack or pwede ma-leak sa iba niya tao. Next. Okay. Sa Philippines naman, we have isa sa mga issue sa Philippines is ang criminal justice system naton, because one court per 50,000 people. So, amo ni ang one of the most critical problems in the Philippines. Especially subong nga nagka-pandemic, like though limited because of social distancing and mga quarantine. So, mas nag-overburden ang cases and wala sang enough staff to process ang mga cases. Next. Court cases takes years to be resolved. So, isa man sa mga issues here in the Philippines, like for example, ang sa Sandigan Bayan, which is a constitutional court for public officials, and it takes an average of 15 years to judge a case. So, these delays have led to acquittals of corrupt public officials. And the Sandigan Bayan Court has a low conviction rate. This in turn hampers anti-corruption measures in the countries. Notable such cases as one involving. So like, sometimes kaka-dismiss na lang ang cases because wala gaka-delay ang mga hearings and ang mga para ma-close ang case. Next. So, many Filipinos are too poor to access justice. So, poverty is also a big stumbling block because the majority of the population is still poor and they cannot afford legal services. Even if they have access to public attorney, which is meant for the poorest of the poor, public attorneys are undermanned and have huge backlog of cases. And ang nagdugang pagid kay nag-COVID, like, though, kisa mas ginapili nila nga hindi mag-bail para lang sa food, though, sang ilang families. So, because of clogged judicial and court systems, overcrowded prisons are the most visible problem plaguing the correctional facilities. Next. So, prisoners' rights continue to be disrespected and ignored. This has prompted human rights groups to call for reforms to improve conditions for prisoners. So, corrupt and incompetent investigators and prosecutors, a judicial and court system clogged with too many cases and too few judges to try them. So, I don't know kung nabatian nyo na ang sa case ni Karen, ang sa PBB na bala. na na-involve siya sa drugs. Pero hambal niya wala siya. Na innocent yun siya. And nadalahig lang siya. And it took her years para lang maka-trial and ma-plead siya nga not guilty with her case. So, amo na siya. So, isa pa gid is ang sa war on drugs because ang human rights groups are agitated about that because they claim nga ang extrajudicial murders are occurring on daily basis. So, it will likely be a matter of time before the gross injustices befalling detainees and prisoners will be another issues that dogs the Duterte administration. Sorry. Next. Okay. Inability to post bail adds thousands of pre-trial detainees to the prison system. So, na nga, ang iban is poor, nga hindi maka-post bail. So, hindi sila ka-trial, hindi sila kagwa. So, ga-add up lang ang mga prisoners and overcrowded ang prisons. Next. Sige, next. Okay, ako na. So, forensic psychologists play an important role in the criminal justice system. So, we have 3 theories of criminal justice. The first is the restorative justice theory, and it focuses on how to heal the harm caused by the crime. It advocates for the rehabilitation of offenders through reconciliation with the victims and the community affected by the crime. So, sa restorative justice theory, ang participation sa victims plays a big role in the resolution of the crime. So, ang offenders man dapat ang mag-engage kung paano sila mag-make amends with the victims and provides restitutions to the victims with the goal of reintegration of both offenders and victims within the society. So, sa application of restorative justice in criminal cases, ginaalaw nilang victims na mag-testify sa sentencing hearing about the impact of the crime on their lives and gives them a role in the decision-making process to hold offenders accountable. Next naman is ang retributive justice theory. So, dali naman is punishment over rehabilitation. So, this theory argues nga kung ano kagrabe ang crime, dapat amuman kagrabe ang punishment. So, it is therefore morally wrong to punish innocent people for crimes they have not committed. So, obviously, sa Philippines, damo sang innocent people who were punished because of our justice system. So, there are also people who commits crime by its pleasure or satisfies them. But ang retributive justice theory argues that punishment must cause enough pain. Dapat mas ma-outweigh sang punishment ang pleasure nga gaka-feel sang offender. So, the major focus of retribution rests on the nature of the crime itself and the accountability for the offenders rather than the effect of the crime on the victims. Next is the transformative justice. It offers a structural approach that analyzes the social conditions in which crimes happen, the reasons for victimization, the need for restitution, and the establishment or restoration of peace and security. Okay. So, This examines the root cause of crime, and as we all know nga, um, inequality within social, political, and economic systems can lead to individuals doing crimes because of lack of money, poverty, and transformative approaches strive to improve the quality of life for victims, offenders, and the community by addressing the social and economic inequalities that cause the crime. Um, it opposes all forms of violence, including state sanction and individual actions, punishments, institutionalizations, and imprisonment. Instead, they propose community and government programs based on accountability, forgiveness, healing, and inclusive education, which I think is impossible. And transformative justice approaches have begun to influence social policies beyond criminal justice. So more on social inequality. Ang gina-point out nila is because gahimo gahimo ang tao sang crime because of the inequality and the ang unjustness sang aton nga um, criminal justice system. Next. Isaiah.
Okay. So, so next is Sutherland's differential association theory. So this explains people learn to become offenders from the environment through interaction with others. Individual learn the values, attitudes, methods, and motives for criminal behavior. So in other words, ang 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 criminal behavior, it is learned through contact with individuals who are criminal themselves. So next slide, please. Next. So, so the theory of differential association has 9 propositions. So the first one is criminal behavior is learned. Criminal behavior is not inherited. The person not trained in crime does not invent criminal behavior. So this means that criminal behavior is learned or when a person imitates someone. So it is not inherited uh, or from genes. Next, criminal behavior is learned in interactions with other persons in a process of communication. Communication is verbal in many cases, including gestures. So criminal behavior can be also learned when a person interacts with with a certain groups and with the certain groups of people. Next, the principal part of learning of criminal behavior occurs within intimate personal groups. So this means the impersonal communication such as movies or newspaper play a relatively unimportant part in committing criminal behavior. So movies or newspapers may contribute in committing criminal behaviors. Next slide. Number 4. When criminal behavior is learned, the learning includes techniques of committing the crime, which are sometimes very simple. B. The specific direction of motives, drives, rationalizations, and attitudes. Next is the specific direction of the motives and drives is learned from definitions of legal codes as favorable or unfavorable. So this context is usually found in US where culture conflict in relation to the legal code exists. Next slide. A person becomes delinquent, or which means a person who is about to commit a crime. It is because of an excess of definitions favorable to violation of law over definitions unfavorable to violations of law. So, in other words, criminal behavior naga-emerge siya when one is exposed to more social messages favoring criminal conduct than pro-social messages. Um, so when people become criminal, they do so not only because of contacts with criminal patterns, but also because of isolation from anti-criminal patterns. Negatively, this means that association which are neutral so far as crime is concerned have little or no effect on the genesis of criminal behavior. Next slide. Differential association may vary in frequency to one duration, priority, or intensity. So out of these three, priority seems to be important principally through its selective influence. And intensity has to do with such things as prestige of the source of a criminal or anti-criminal pattern and with emotional reactions related to the association. These modalities would be rated in quantitative form and mathematical ratio, but development of formula in this sense has not been developed and would be very difficult. Next slide. The process of learning criminal behavior by association with criminal and anti-criminal three patterns involves all of the mechanisms that are involved in any other learning. Negatively, this means that the learning of criminal behavior is not restricted to the process of imitation. So criminal behavior can be learned not only by imitation, but by but also in, for example, persuasion. Like by dan by dan ka abi by dan ka parang makumit ka sa amo ni nga crime. So for instance, if a example, a person is seduced, for instance, learns criminal behavior by association, but this would not be ordinarily described as imitation. So persuasion or, or persuasion or a person is being seduced in order to commit a crime is not imitation. Okay, next slide. While criminal behavior is an expression of general needs and values, it is not explained by those general needs and values since non-criminal behavior is an expression of the same needs and values. So, in other words, the general needs and values which cause a criminal behavior is the same for the non-criminal behavior, which is why it is not explained by those general needs. So here, for example, thieves generally steal in order to secure money, but likewise, honest laborers work in order to earn money. The attempts to explain criminal behavior by general drives and values such as money motives have been and must be completely to be futile since they explain lawful behavior as completely as they explain criminal behavior. Okay, next one. So, so here is a study in delinquency development by Cambridge. So this study followed 411 males at the beginning of the study. They were all living in a working class deprived inner city area of South London. So the most significant childhood risks were family criminality, daring or risk-taking, low school attainment, poverty, and poor parenting. So this theory predicts that predicts that offenders will come from families that have history of criminal acts, and that the criminal activities in which they are involved are similar to the ones they have learned. So, evidence suggests that criminality is concentrated in a small number of families. So, for example, Walmsley and others found that one-third of the prison population in the United Kingdom also had relatives in the prison. This again could be interpret as support for the influence of genetic factors. A prospective longitudinal study of the development of offending and antisocial behaviors in 411 males. Okay, next slide. So, so the critical evaluation of the differential association theory. So this theory can be applied to any type of crime and to any socio-economic background. Like for example, individuals of middle-class background are exposed to middle-class values and learn to commit middle-class crimes such as fraud, whereas individuals from a disadvantaged background might learn burglary. Though the research only focused on burglary and vandalism. The theory does not explain why criminality decreases within age. 40% of offenses are committed by under 21 years old individuals. Many young offenders do not carry on offending in the adult life. The fact that criminality runs in families could be explained by the psychodynamic explanation of offending behavior, whereby a child internalizes a deviant superego from the same-sex parent during the resolution of the Oedipus complex for boys and the Electra for girls. So it is socially sensitive as it could lead to the stereotyping of individuals who come from criminal background as likely to commit crimes themselves, and based on this prediction, opportunities could be denied to them.
So that ends our reporting, and thank you and God bless.
Hello. What what surprised you or ano ang takeaways niyo from your research about forensic psychology?
Ako na lang muna, ma'am.
Mm.
Nang na-realize naman na ang justice system, 'di ba, sa Philippines is not that good. Just like sa report naman nga hindi siya kuando anti-poor ato na justice system kag damo-damo siya proseso,
Mm.
like palawig gyud ya ang maghatag justice if wala ka kwarta, kung wala ka kapit bala, ma'am.
Mm.
Amon na akon na realization kag ka-ironic man kung kis-as ang mga kung sinong ara sa mga may higher positions bala sila pa na din gaobra sang ka-commit sang mga crimes like gaobra sang mga false nga mga ulabrahon. So mana, ma'am.
Mm. Okay. Sige, how about the others? Sige.
Ang sako naman, ma'am, since emerging, ano pa siya, di ba, ma'am, top field sa psychology,
Mm.
medyo ang definitions niya wala, ma'am, sa iba niya sources, do lain-lain pa. So, do kay may nakita ako source nga sang forensic psychology, do nagpareha siya sa criminal psychology. So, do nag-confuse ko gamay. But, do personally daan do interested ko kung may ipersuman ko nga hamba ko sang una kung may ipersuman ko nga field sa psychology, it's forensic psychology. Pero sa nag-research ko, do napaka-question ko kay do lain siya gali, like tsakto ang hambal nila nga lain ang ginapagwa sa TV or movies kung anong ginaubra sang forensic psychology sa kung ano gid sa tuod ang roles sang forensic psychology. Kay like gaano sila, like gahatag sila evaluation,
Mm.
ga-recommend sila sentencing, ga-testify sila for as an expert witness, do more on criminal justice um ara sila sa mas go work sila with the criminal justice kaysa sa investigations that we see in movies and TV shows.
Mm. True gina. Okay. Other people who would like to share?
Ma'am,
Okay.
may isa pa gid gali, ma'am.
Sige, sige.
Ang sa transformative justice theory ni bala, ma'am, nasa three big theories of criminal justice. Like ga-propose sila sang community and government program based on accountability, forgiveness, healing, and inclusive education. For me, though, hindi siya mag-do kay like hindi sila gusto nila kwaon ang imprisonment.
Mm.
So like do para sa Philippines, I think hindi siya maging effective. Kay
Mm.
do easier said and done ang i-forgive mo lang na siya gamay nga talk.
Mm.
Forgive mo lang na
True.
siya kaya na. But what if gabi-gabi could be ang case nga nahimo sang offender sa victims. So that's do
So, kung kisa
do ka.
gani more on retributive gid kita, no, ang do nature
Yes,
tabala
ma'am.
kung kisa as human beings, though an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Kumuga kung
Yes.
ginsalaan mo ko, dapat mabalos gid ko. And
Mm.
instead of quelling that anger in your heart, do mas ano pagid, diba? Mas nagdako pagid kung nag-revenge ka. And ang question na gani, kung naka-revenge ka gid man, will it really satisfy you? Will it really improve your mental health? Makatulog ka pa na bala? If you know nga, naka-retribute ka. So, different people man, different ways of coping, and different ways of taking in kung ano para sila ang injustice and how do they handle it. So, ang role tagidi is, amo na, help them man i-realize man kung anong best para sa ila. And yeah, so hindi lang, do ka ideal gid gani nga do ma-forgive sang mga victim, family sang victim, ang perpetrator. But there are cases gid nga, yeah, na-forgive na gid man, but amo na is still the perpetrator needs to face gid kung anong punishment based sa rules or based court. Kay ang attitude ba naton kung kaysa dan as Filipinos, di ba nga, kung balanta may isa lang isa ka tawo sa aton, gusto naton i-take ang justice at our own hands. Do tungod bala sa current system sang aton nga justice system, do gakawad-an kita salig, so kita na lang ang ma-judge sa amo na tawo kung kisa may amo kita na mob mentality bala. So, diba, tawag mo, tanan yung Dasera case, diba? last year.
Yes, ma'am, ang kay
Mm.
Christine de Serra.
Oo, 'di ba? So, people are really quick to judge, especially in social media. Nabatian lang, di ba, nga amo to natabo, tapos gin accuse gid ng mga tawo ang mga friends ni Christine Dacera. And I think, though I partially watched the videos, I mean the interview of Boy Abunda sa friends bala tong na-accuse pala on on how it really affected them on a personal level. So makita nyo gid na distress gid sila because of what happened. May mga guilt and regrets gid sila nga kumaga para sila, they did their best to save their friend, but of course they cannot avoid man nga others will view them as criminals, especially gid sa social media. And kapin pa may mob mentality kitan, we often witch hunt, bala niyo yung witch hunt, diba? You know, bala niyo na mo na a term, so ano niyo bala, gina-mob yung isa ka tao, something like that, gina-witch hunt. So, subong gani, di ba? Dumi ginawa, witch hunt naman nga girl, poblasyon girl naman ang gina-witch hunt patungod sa iyang partying and all that. And, of course, people will use it sometimes to their political agenda and all. But I hope we learn something good from these events. And, amo na, and I hope good someday our trust sa justice system will come back. Especially good if there are really reforms there. And if ma-notice nyo sa Amerika, gamay lang nga cases ang gina-accept sa Supreme Court sa Amerika. That's why though less ang stress dito. Kay grabe ang salig sa Amerika sa ilang justice system. Nga, sa ano pa lang, sa local, hindi lang court, gina-make sure good nga may fair na trial. And sa Amerika man abi, they use the jury system, unlike sa aton judge good ang ga
Preside.
preside, yes. Ang judge gid ang preside, kag judge gid bala ang gahatag sang sentence sa sa America, jury. So if you do another case nun bala nga, I don't know if I mentioned it inyo, ang kay Kyle Rittenhouse a case. So ang sa iya nga to nga case, may unique daan nga law, or may unique na constitution sa constitution sang America. May ara sila sang amendment sa ilang constitution nga they have the right to take arms and defend themselves. Amo gina yung do unique sa America compare sa aton nga ano. So of course there are it is due to the Black Lives Matter nga mga protest. So may mga iban nga protest, of course, nga very peaceful, but there are some nga though Antifa sila, so gapang riot sila, gapang mob sila sa kung gabi sila ga protest. Do mo na quote unquote protest. So ginamob nila, ginanakawan ang mga places, ga-riot to sila. So ginatawagan sila nga to Antifa na type. So one day dayon, syempre si Kyle Rittenhouse, he is from that place. And of course, given the right nga may right sila to take arms, may dala siya nga gun. Okay? Pero, ang sa case ni Kyle Rittenhouse, he shot 3 people. 2 people were dead. 1 na injured. So, ang reason, according kay Kyle, is self-defense. Kay tungod nga gin-mob siya sa mga rioters. And unfortunately, before pa nagwa ang truth about sa natabo kay Kyle Rittenhouse, ang media dugin sensationalize nila kag dugin slander nila si Kyle Rittenhouse, kay ginambala nila siya nga active shooter. So when you say active shooter, though siya gid mismo ang nag-shoot bala, hindi to self-defense. Dugin slander na nila before even nag-cut to sa court. And so, of course, nakita ang mga videos, evidences nga it was really self-defense. So, makita nyo man gapon ang proof of video sa YouTube, pero heavily filtered si YouTube. Kumaga, if you type in ng Kyle Rittenhouse, puro mainstream media ang mga gagguluwa. And it was really a politicized case. Kay ginambal nila nga si Kyle Rittenhouse, very right-wing, racist, doon na. And ang gamba, tapos hambal sang left naman nga kung ma-acquit si Rittenhouse, alleviate, hindi alleviate, mag-aggravate ang injustice when it comes to black people. Tapos, damo gambal nga, ang gimpamatay ko na ni Kyle Rittenhouse, black people, pero hindi man, puro man to white people, ang yagin, associate siya bala as really a criminal, a racist, and all. So, amo pa na ang one of the few observations ko in the last year nga, grabe gid mag-sensationalize ang media, and especially gid sa mga cases, mga controversial cases, just like na manakay Dasera, di ba? Like, we tend to judge dayon people based even without knowledge of what they have really done or the truth bala. So so I hope man sa aton in our heart na when we try to listen to people, when for example a criminal or someone nga nag-offend, naka-offend sang isa ka person, magkato sa aton for emotional support, for counseling. So we must have a heart man to listen to them intently. So kung ibalikan taman tong criminal nga psychology topic, diba, there are different reasons why people commit crime. And ang importante is not because of what they did, but what they can do now and anong ilang plans sa future. So dara ang aton role as psychologists on how we can help them rehabilitate kids. So yeah, so any questions, class? May questions ka mo or any questions? Wala naman. Okay, so I will just open again the assignment, ang last assignment and the other assignments nga wala yun na So, ang deadline sa reflection paper number 5 will be on January 7. Okay, so I'll just check na lang your attendance. Tapos, I think group 10, please update your PDF na submission kay I think the one that you submitted sa submission box do ang incomplete version to siya. So, paki-update na lang. Okay?
Sige, ma'am.
Sige. Please say present if you're